No, just normal, regular.
My
No, that's not regular. That's not regular.
Created.
Can you say my life creative?
My wife creative.
Yeah, I think a photographer is heavily skewed by where they live. Neither of my parents had any really creative outlets or creativity in their bones at all. And ironically, my brother and I are the exact opposite. You can stop asking that question.
And you have a family. I mean,
it's
not. I mean, you support your family on
Yes.
this. This isn't like a little sidekick hobby.
Nope.
And welcome everybody to My Life Creative. I am Richard Zombeck. I'm here with Pamela Joy.
Hi, Richard.
How's it going?
It's going dandy.
Great. Well, listen, before we get started, I want to remind everyone that you can find us at mylifecreative.com. You can find out how to support us and also how to review and rate us on iTunes. We do need your support to keep going. So this episode's interview is with Michael Ash Smith. Pamela, you did the interview, so why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
I would be happy to. Michael he works in wedding photography primarily, but we talked at length about artistry and creating from an artist's place. And I got to tell you, his work is really interesting. It's unusual, and he likened it to the word weird. He said weird a lot, but weird in a good way. So we talked a lot about how he approaches his work, how he got into photography, how he's always been creating. I was particularly interested in him because he lives in Pennsylvania, not close to where I grew up, but I understand the environment that he's working in. And a lot of his work is in natural environments. So I had a lot of questions for him. And I got to tell you, just at the end of it, I haven't felt really that excited in experimenting and trying new things. And like, he really shifted my head a little bit about how you can look at something a little differently and how you might approach something a little differently. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll just end with this, with him. He's predominantly 97% film, and not just because it's film, right? He enjoys the feel and the sound and the effect of film, but he does work with digital. Like, he's just found film works for him best. And I think it's amazing that he does the work he does in Polaroids and in medium format and 35 millimeter. So very interesting.
So he does the whole darkroom stuff and everything.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have a darkroom. He primarily uses film because he hates to be at a computer, and he would rather be shooting than editing. He does not like Photoshop or any kind of post-production. So film works for him. He sends it out to a lab. They process. It comes back digital. He posts it. He's done.
Wow. So born in the wrong century, I guess.
Or the right century, because you
exactly.
had to process your own film before, you know?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's listen to the interview, and we'll come back on the other side.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of this area, so I've been okay with staying out of it. I tend to kind of gravitate towards the West Coast. So, Philadelphia is not a region where I particularly love, so I'm not.
That's
really
interesting, because all of your work is so immersed in nature and Pennsylvania and woods, and I mean the scenes are kind of I know them because it's what I grew up in. So it's interesting that you're.
Yeah, I think a photographer is heavily skewed by where they live, which is. I don't know if I haven't determined if that's good or bad. I always wonder that, because there are people that are photographers that are blessed to be in an area where it's either something that's upcoming or something that is people find attractive at that given time, and in some weird way you're kind of thrown into this mix and you have a almost advantage over other photographers because of where you live. But that being said, yeah, I think that you draw from what you can from around you and use that to your advantage. So I can see that it being that kind of a Pennsylvania feeling to the images, because that's pretty much where I work. So it's going to naturally have that feeling, that style.
So if you grew up in Pennsylvania, right? That's where you grew up.
I was born in Buffalo, but I only lived there for about, I don't even remember it. So maybe a year or two. And then my dad lost his job there, and then we moved to Pennsylvania. So I've been here my entire life.
So growing up there, what was that like for you? I mean, were you interested in art or making things or music or poetry, or what was it like growing up?
I think that we grew up in a blue collar family. Blue collar. Well, I mean, at first it was blue collar, and then it kind of turned white collar. So typical suburban white suburbs. At first it wasn't. I mean, we grew up in an area where it was kind of newly developed, and my parents took a shot at it. It wasn't something that was established yet. It was basically a brand new area, but they got really lucky in that they moved and lived in an area where it kind of skyrocketed to something that everybody desired. So the school district that I was in was one of the top ones in Pennsylvania. So people started flocking to the area. So I think we grew up in a regular kind of suburban setting, and my parents being just regular workers. My dad was a salesman, and my mom didn't work for the first few years of when my brother and I were born, but then went and got a job, and she was in insurance. So typical standard suburban jobs, and neither of my parents had any really creative outlets or creativity in their bones at all. And ironically, my brother and I are the exact opposite. So we both did everything creative. I was in bands. I played in the band. I was in rock bands. I drew all the time. I wrote things. I didn't really get into photography until my mid to late 20s, but I still loved photography, and I had friends that did it and followed it and enjoyed the process, but I just never really picked up a camera. And my brother was always into music, and now it's funny because I'm a photographer, and my brother is a sound engineer, so he records music. So we went from being this typical family that you would think of in the Philly suburbs, and then it's kind of flip-flopped around, and my parents to this day do not really understand what my brother and I do and still don't think that we have like livings. Like they just don't, it doesn't register with them. My dad is always like, well, so are you still making money? I'm like, yes, Dad. Geez. It's been 10 years. You can stop asking that question. I feel like.
And you have a family. I mean,
it's
not. I mean, you support your family on
Yes.
this. This isn't like a little sidekick hobby.
No,
not
it's
that.
not a hobby.
Not that there's anything wrong with that either.
Not at
but
all.
it is like your bread and butter. This is how you make a living.
Yep. I worked in banking. I was following that sales kind of route in my 20s. I worked in banking, and then for a few years I needed a job. My parents divorced. I couldn't go to college anymore. They were like, we're not paying for you. And I was like, fine, I'm going to take a year off. I needed a job. My buddy's dad was a vice president of a local community bank where I was living. Got a job through him. Ended up working my way up pretty fast into management there. And within 2 or 3 years, I was doing well in the bank, and I ended up not going back to college because I was already ahead of all my colleagues or my peers. So I stayed with them, and then flip-flopped to a different job in sales with another buddy of mine who started a company, stayed with them for a few years, and actually went back to banking. And it wasn't until I was about 29 where I left that banking job. And when I left that banking job, my wife, we had just had our daughter. She was about 9 months old, and we have a stepson, or I have a stepson, our son Tyler. So he was, I think, 4 or 5, and I basically just one day said, I'm not cut out for this life in this kind of business world, sales, corporate world, and I quit. And that was in the spring of 2009.
Wow.
And so Kathleen, who was my wife, didn't work. She stayed home with the kids, and I said, "Screw this! We're just gonna try this and do it." And that's the way we've been ever since. So that was just under 10 years, not 10 years, but
Right.
I think that, yeah. So this is my 8th year or whatever, or beginning of the 9th year or something like that.
That's incredible. So you just know, how do you, well, a couple things that I thought about when you were talking is all of that, like being in the bank, the regimen of the day-to-day, your scheduling, and also I would imagine you're probably pretty good with finances. So those are really good skills to have that most artists are, there's that side of it. And then the other side is you were talking with people, especially if you were in sales. You had to connect with people and work with them and figure them out and have a conversation with them. Again, another big part of, particularly in photography, if you're working with people, is being able to connect. So how do you ever think about those things, or is that just...
I attribute any success that I have to those two things.
Huh.
So I feel as though, in some weird way, it's almost like I'm thankful for those things that happened first. I do always think about, I wish I was that artsy 19-year-old that got straight into photography. I could have been 10 years ahead, and all these things, because I didn't really start until I was about 30. And I dabbled in photography in my mid-20s, but I never really paid much attention to it. But yeah, those two things, dealing with people on a daily basis and also understanding finances, I dealt with small business loans, I dealt with all that kind of stuff, definitely gave me a leg up on my competition for sure. I knew what to do, where to go, how to start my business. I knew how to talk to people, and right away I could talk to people even before I was even shooting weddings full time. I was, could talk to people and convince them to hire me. So there's a lot of sales in photography, especially wedding photography, that you don't think about when you're first starting out. And I do think that a lot of people have that artistic ability and that talent, and they just don't have that business sense or that other side to get it going, and they don't know how to proceed. So while I would love to say that I grew up with a camera in my hand and it's been attached to me and all that stuff, it didn't happen like that. I had 10 years of finance and sales and business experience for me to make that switch. And it was still scary as hell. Don't get me wrong. I have 2 kids, 2 cars, and a mortgage, and no savings. And I said, okay, I'm going to quit. And here we go. And that was a big, big risk. But I definitely am thankful that I had those things at my disposal, kind of armed me for what I needed to do. So yeah, I think about that all the time. And I tell people that all the time too.
Well, and to not make it like this, I kind of want to be real for a second. It's not like at that point you had never photographed and didn't know what was going on. I would imagine you had, because I was really not surprised, but really kind of impressed that you're pretty much 100% film.
Pretty much, yeah. The only thing that I use digital for are nighttime receptions for weddings. I don't see the point in using film for dancing photos and just kind of indoor super low light situations. It's just not worth it. I can get the digital
Smart.
to look fairly close
There's
to
your
film.
financing background again.
Right, yeah. I mean,
in business,
I don't.
it's not smart.
I'm definitely not that photographer who's like, I'm all film and I have to be all film, and I'm definitely not that. Film is the way of the old, digital is it. I enjoy anything that's going to provide me with the ability to do my job. So I utilize both. But yes, I would say in the grand scheme of things, I'm a good 85 to 90% film. But I didn't start with film. I started with digital. I started right when the Nikon D70 came out. My daughter was about 9 months old, and roughly about the time we moved in here, and that's when the digital camera started getting better. It was 6 megapixels, I believe. And it was kind of that jump over to the world was saying, okay, now digital cameras are equivalent to the quality of 35 millimeter film. Because before that, they weren't. It was 2 megapixels or 1 or 3, and people still argued that 35 millimeter film is greater. So I think the timing of it was wonderful. I think that's another thing that I think about a lot was that, I could have started when I was 19 or 20, but I would have learned entirely differently. And I learned with digital, which allowed me to experiment heavily. And so I purchased, I remember the price, it was $1,399. I bought it from Best Buy, pick up in store when that was just announced. That whole concept was brand new. And I bought it and went to pick it up, and I didn't use it for like the first 6 months until my daughter was a little bit older, maybe closer to 1, and started using it more heavily. And the digital is a huge blessing because it allowed you to experiment. And the first camera I ever shot was a Nikon N60, which is film, and I used it for about a month because I didn't know what I was doing, and the film development was so insanely expensive even back then. So this digital camera allowed me to go outside and go around in those Pennsylvania woods and just take pictures and come back home and just mess with them. And that kind of gave me an incentive to try different things and experiment, which then led me into photographing people, which ultimately led me starting to use film, because every time that I saw an image that I gravitated towards or I really enjoyed it, most of the time it was a film image. So that's when I started picking up film, about 2 years after I started.
And so when you made your decision to go for it, you already felt technically competent.
So
you knew
I hate editing.
Doesn't everybody?
And I like to be behind the camera. I have no desire to be behind a computer and spend days and days editing. And even to this day, my editing process, there are weddings that I shoot entirely digital. If it's a super cold, rainy December day and it's a 3-hour wedding in something in Philadelphia where it's dismal out and dark, I'm not going to use film, and I'll do it entirely digital. And I am okay with that. It doesn't give me the exact look I want, but I'm okay with that. But I'll edit a wedding in just a couple hours, and that's because I cannot stand editing. So to me, it was a natural way of doing things where film allowed me to take pictures and use the cameras that I wanted to shoot, and then I was basically done. So it kind of was an incentive for me, and to try at least dabble into it and see how I liked it and see the cost associated with it and stuff like that. So it didn't take me very long. I started taking pictures with my camera in 2007, the digital camera, and by 2009 I was using film more and more. But it wasn't until about 2012ish where I pretty much made the massive switch and got rid of all the digital gear that I had. So at this point I only have one digital camera.
And the rest is all film.
The rest is all film, yeah.
And you do a range of film. You've got Polaroids, medium format, 35.
Yeah, I do all sorts of. Again, this kind of goes back to that concept where I'm going to use whatever I like, and I don't have this. I'm not a gearhead, so to speak, where I'm not going to use this because technically it works well, better than this camera. I'm going to shoot what feels good in my hands and what I feel comfortable shooting, and it tends to be a range of things. It's Polaroids, medium format. I shoot both 3 medium format. Shoot the Rollei is probably my favorite camera, a Holga, and also the Mamiya 7. And then 35 millimeter. The only camera 35 millimeter I shoot are Leicas, and then
my dream. I've always dreamed of having a Leica.
Yeah, they're amazing cameras. It's just, it gives me the feeling and aesthetic that I enjoy. They have their pros and cons, and I love Leicas during weddings. I love to shoot them. They're small, they're lightweight, and they're non in your face, and so they greatly benefit me at weddings. I don't shoot them ever really for portrait work. That usually I stick to instant film or medium format. I mean, it's in there for sure, but it's not.
No, that makes sense. Its strength is documentary.
Right. It's definitely a faster, more documentary camera, so I use it to that strength. But yeah, I'm all over the place with the film stuff. I think it gives me that, like, there's safety in digital, which a lot of people love and desire, and I've never been one for safety, and I love.
That's interesting. So to explain that a little, or talk about that a little bit more. You don't like safety. Is that like where?
I think that if you are safe in your ways, I think you just become you just kind of settle in, and settling in to me is never really a good thing when it comes to art. I think that the safer it is, the less challenging it becomes, and the less artistic you can be. So I enjoy, even though it sounds horrible, I enjoy those flaws and the challenge that film presents me, and I almost get like a kick out of it, and it makes me rise to the occasion and do better. And it's funny, every time that I say to people all the time, and I'm sure other people have the same feeling, but whenever I'm put into a position where I start to worry about if I can do it, I always get my best work, because it's just, you're forced to navigate a situation that you haven't really come across, and because of that, your sense of awareness is heightened and you end up doing better. I mean, that's what I take from it. The best shoots and sessions and weddings I can recall are the ones that I've been challenged the most. And
what's a good example of that?
Okay, so I was doing a shoot in New York City a few years ago. It was an engagement shoot, and I don't bring digital to portrait sessions, so I only bring film on purpose. And at this particular time, we had plans to shoot roughly around 4:30 or 5, and sunset was something like 5:30 or 6. You still get twilight, so I always allow for enough time to finish a full session. So I had my film in, loaded, ready to go, and my clients were about 90 minutes late to their session, and they kept saying, we'll be right there, we'll be right there, and obviously they weren't right there. And it was getting dark. It was nearly dark by the time I even started. The sun was set and it was twilight. And at that point, I didn't bring around any 3200 film. And I also wasn't sure how somebody would be comfortable with all black and white 3200 film. Everybody likes color, even if they say they don't. They still like a little bit of color. So it basically shot this entire thing with this color film in extremely low lit situations, and most of the film was color film. Doesn't do that great pushing, and I had Kodak Gold in there, so it wasn't even a film that was phenomenally pushed like a portrait. And I was worried the whole entire time. I was shooting at shutter speeds of 15 and 30 for a lot of things, and it was a bit of a challenge, and I was a bit paranoid because it's not personal work where I can just be like, whatever, I don't really care. These people paid me and they pay good money to have me, and they're expecting something good, and I don't ever want to come back to somebody and say, yeah, I screwed up your images, sorry. So I was a little bit worried, but at the same time I was trying new things and finding situations where I'd never looked for, and with some lighting and really pushing the boundaries. And it ended up being one of the best engagement sessions I shot that year, if not over a 2 or 3 year period.
Wow.
And just because, in all honesty, at some points I didn't even know if I was going to get a good image. And I had to push a lot of the color film farther than I normally pushed. And it just ended up being really, you can tell I remember it to this day. I've probably photographed 250, 300 engagement sessions. So it's one that stands out. So I like to be in that situation, and I think a lot of photographers get too comfortable with what they're doing, and it becomes a regimen, and it becomes a mundane situation, and they're really good at walking in, technically being accurate and doing a good job, and walking out. And they provide good images, but they don't go to the next level. And until you challenge yourself, I don't think that you can get to the next level. So that's what I like to do. So it's funny because I walked into a studio space a few weeks ago, and I was looking for a space, a little room for a project that I have in mind. And they're like, oh, this room is over here, gets this light, this room gets this light, and this room. And I was like, well, I'm actually looking for something with maybe one window that doesn't really have much light. And they stared at me, and they said, well, you're the first photographer that has ever asked that question, because we always hear that you want more light. I'm like, yeah, I just want to be challenged, so I have an idea. So I think that I'm always looking for something outside of the box, and I am that person. I fully admit that when everybody goes this way, I will go this way for sure.
Well, as you were talking, I was scrolling through your Instagram feed to see if I could find that one, and I'm always struck over and over of how, in some ways, so many of them feel like a dream, like a moment of a dream. There's your ability to hone in on a little tiny detail that I don't know that I would even see. There's one where it's really a dark image, and I'm trying to find it here. I just saw it. It's a really dark image, and you just have a very vague outline of a veil of the person walking away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there it is. You just see the trace, the highlight of. So I guess I was interested in a lot of these. I'm sure you're at a point now where you know what you see it, you go with it. But when you were first starting out, did you find ways to practice these things, or how did you, particularly again, because you're on film and somebody's paying you, so do you have a couple roles maybe you keep for yourself as experimental? Like I do that. I haven't photographed a lot of weddings, but the ones, any session that I've done, there are always some for me. And sometimes they like them and sometimes they don't. But I'm wondering how you handle that, or if there are lots and lots of mistakes that lead to that one that's really good.
I think that in the beginning it was the latter part of what you said. It was a lot of mistakes that led to really good. And then what started happening is that I would put those images in and I would get good feedback. And then I learned and was able to create those images more consistently. Mm-hmm. And a lot of photographers, you'll hear it all the time, put out what you want to shoot. So I think for me, at some point a few years ago, I just really disengaged with that whole kind of philosophy of you put out what people want to see, and that kind of thing where it's like, I'm in business, I need to show people, and people don't like black and white, so I'm going to show color, or people like these bright color pictures but not these dark ones, so I'm going to show that. I think that I tuned that out a long time ago and said, you know what, I like these little double exposures with little highlights in them, and started posting those. And then it's not a super popular aspect, so it doesn't garner a lot of attention, but the attention that it gets are pretty hardcore. So if you see it and you want it right away, either you don't or you do. And because in the beginning I would experiment constantly with those double exposures and the film, and underexposing and overexposing, and I was able to get to a point where I got good at it and can do it consistently now. Whereas now I'm very few, there won't be very many images where I'm like, well, that didn't work. Okay, well, that didn't work. I mean, it happens here and there. For instance, I did a wedding last August with a friend where I took a roll of black and white and put it in a Canon AE1 35mm camera, and I walked around prior to the wedding, about 15 minutes prior to the wedding, and walked around this house and just photographed all sorts of weird things. Like I photographed paintings and pictures and some bushes and some trees and windows, and then I took the roll out, rewound it first, not take it out, but rewound it, took the roll out, and I had it marked with a little Sharpie. I marked where I started the roll, put it back in, and then reshot it throughout the entire day. And so out of 36 shots, I think I only used or liked maybe 5 or 6 or 7. So that's a low keeper rate. But at the same time, if I was going to be happy with 1 or 2, because it was such a weird thing to do, I didn't have any idea what I was shooting over. So it was just constant experimentation. So if I do something like that, which I do often, that's not all the time, I'm a little bit more cautious when I'm shooting a wedding or client work, because I don't want to miss anything. Like, I'd never do that and then for their first kiss or when they're up for their ceremony and start just being like, okay, I'm going to wing this. I would never do that. Like, so it has to be in certain instances where I know I've already got the shot or something like that. But the ultimate goal, I think, is to keep getting weirder and odder, because I want people to hire me because of that. And I've definitely niched myself out in that little weird, awkward world where a lot of people, I don't get hired for safety for weddings, and most of the weddings that I get hired for, they're kind of understanding that they're going to get these weird images, and I wouldn't call them weird. I mean, they're still weddings, so you can only niche yourself out so much in the world of weddings. I mean, you won't be shooting very many weddings, and you won't get hired very much if you go crazy. So there is this aspect of a balance between I have to provide for my family, but I also I want to do what I love. So what I always tell clients is that, yeah, I'm going to give you those solid images. I'm going to take pictures of you and your family. That's going to happen, and you're going to get normal looking pictures. But at the same time, I'm going to really experiment on some instances and really try to get you something cool and unique that nobody else has. And even if it ends up being 5-10 shots at a wedding, I always throw those in to their slideshows or their things, and more often than not, they love them because that's what they see on my Instagram and my blog, and they're like, "Oh, we like that weird shot," you know? So I think,
you know what's interesting is you keep calling them weird. I see them as very artistic. They're very crafted, they're very expressive, and they're flawed in a beautiful way. They're not weird. They're really poetry. They're, to me, what photography as an art form is all about. It's not, even though I come from and really do like the straight documentary, Time Life magazine from the 60s, that sort of feel. I follow a lot of current street photographers who push that, who either with motion or with an angle, or you get the vibe. I like pictures that make me feel something, and all of your pictures definitively make me feel something. They're not forced into this perfect, and that's my bias. I don't come from the commercial, highly editorial, highly staged. I appreciate them, and I love the people who take an artist's mind and work in that format. Some of the very interesting things come out of Vogue magazine, but when I see it translated into weddings, so many of them, they all look alike. And it's like, how can we outdo this? And it just gets more and more and more. Each time it gets perfect, a little bit of life gets sucked out of it. So yours are very filled with life. That's what I see a lot of.
Well,
so I don't think they're
you.
weird at all. I think they're very beautiful.
Yeah, I think I use weird around the house with my daughter too as a positive notion. I definitely don't use weird as a negative notion. I think that's just the way society has kind of labeled it as weird. I think I use it because it's a word that most people can associate with. But I look at it, I mean, it's just like Portland's slogan, keep Portland weird. I think of it like that, and I use it as not as a marketing tool. Like I'm not out there going, I'm weird, look at me. But at the same time, I definitely use it as a positive thing. Like, my daughter is weird, and I love that she is, and I always tell her that. I'm like, you can stay weird as you want, hun. If you call it weird, fine. It's fine by me. I don't really care. But I think that the photography has a weird, it's just a word that I can use to describe what it's like. But you're right. I definitely gravitate toward that unusual feeling, that small moment, and I cater to that small moment, and I'm constantly posting about it, saying that these are the moments that I look for. These are what make up your wedding day, that kind of thing. I mean, yes, there are standard portraits in there as well, because once in a while I love a standard portrait too. But it's those little things that make up a wedding day, so I'm constantly searching for them. I'm on the ground, I'm looking into the sky, I'm standing sideways, I'm always looking through mirrors, shadows, all those weird things. See, again, I use the word weird because I think that it resonates better with me than the standard typical image. And I know that it's not sexy enough to sell. I know that right off the bat, I know what works very well in marketing and branding as a photographer, and I can start posting those images constantly and probably get a larger audience. But I choose to stay true to myself and my beliefs and post the things that I like, and it ends up being, it changes. Like, if you go through the Instagram feed, it's not a lot of the same. It has the same feel. You can tell it's me, but I think each image I'll go through the gamut. I'll post something color, I'll post something double exposure, I'll post something black and white, I'll post something Holga, I'll post something digital, I'll post something whatever I get a good vibe from, which I think is what is resonating with you. It's some kind of a vibe. Those are the ones I post, and I never really cared if people like them or not. I just post what I really like and hope that somebody else enjoys it as much as I do.
No, it's very cool. So in terms of I wanted to ask you about your landscape, because there's a lot of landscape and so many of them. Mm-hmm. Do you find these locations, particularly for your engagement sessions, do you have areas in mind before you go? Or do you, because you deal, if you have a couple in New York and you're in Pennsylvania, so you're covering a wide range of areas, is that something that you that's a must, or I won't want to say a must, but is that kind of your first instinct, is to take people and immerse them in nature, or do you let their personalities and wishes dictate where you go with them?
I let them dictate 9 times out of 10. And there are situations and areas where I will balk at and say no to, or disagree with, just because I just don't think it'll work. But generally, I guess what I'd like to believe is that if they're coming to me and if they actually hire me, they've already have an idea, because of the thousands of pictures I have online. They've already attracted to the idea that I show. So most of the time, they're going to want to do something close to, home, so to speak, where they enjoy. It just happens to align with me because that's what I'm showing. So there's a lot of nature for sure. There's a lot of woods and stuff like that, and I think that people see that and they're like, oh, that's what we want. So they talk to me and then they hire me. So then we end up doing that. But what I say to them in email or a phone call when we're talking about it is that I want you to be comfortable. So I don't want you to do anything that you're not comfortable doing. So don't get dressed up and shoot at a restaurant if you don't like getting dressed up and going out to eat. That's silly. So what I always suggest is the more comfortable you are, the more those pictures will look comfortable. And if that means that you like to wear sweatpants and hang out on your couch on Sunday morning, then let's shoot there. If that means that you like to go hiking with your dog in the woods, then let's do that. So I think I'm willing to do whatever people are comfortable with. I just think that because I post so much of that, people are attracted to the work, tend to like that stuff already, so you just see more of it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm a big fan of directing and not dictating, and those are two different things. And I will direct and say, I suggest this, and I think this is a good move, and all right, let's try this, and that kind of thing. But I will not dictate, and I never will force somebody to do something they don't want to do. And that is because it's gonna show up in the image. In my opinion, it's gonna show up in the image, and it's going to feel contrived. And very, very rarely are any of the pictures I post on Instagram or my blog something that I said, okay, I need you to do this. Even if it looks kind of contrived, it might have just been an awkward moment between them that I didn't say anything. And I'll direct though. Like I will say, I really like this area. Let's try to utilize this. But then at the same time, I kind of back off and allow natural things to happen. So there is a balance between the two. But I think that's what comes across in the images, is that you look at them and you're like, okay, like that, I can see that. That's kind of real, and that makes me feel something. But it doesn't look too contrived. But it's a cool scenario, and he definitely put them there, but it doesn't look like he forced them there, that kind of thing. I mean, with portrait work and weddings, you're always going to have to direct in some way. It's just not feasible to find clients constantly all the time that know exactly what to do. So
Right,
most of the
right.
time, you're in some way, whether it's a heavy hand or a light hand, you're directing. But the
I
key
like
is,
that word a lot. That's good. It's like choreographing it.
yeah, you're yes, the good choreographers have the ability to make it kind of blend and seamlessly and make it not look awkward and make it look like they just kind of thought of this on their own. And it's the same way of doing it is as a wedding photographer and portrait photographer. I mean, at least for business work, that's what I'm doing. These people aren't talented in modeling and making these pictures look amazing. Like, that's my job. Now the personal work, I tend to go a little bit more less heavy-handed, but I think for the portrait and wedding work, you have to have sort of direction, and I think it elevates the good photographers, the great photographers, from the average and good photographers. I mean, there are plenty of photographers that are really good at taking a picture. There aren't a lot of photographers that are really good at interacting and engaging and directing. That's
No, that's
what
very
takes
true. Yeah.
weddings and portrait world to the next level, for sure. You can see that even when you talk to them, you're out and you can tell the photographers that have a way with people and the ones that don't.
So where do you go for inspiration for things like that? What fills you up for things like that? Where
I think for inspiration, it depends on what we're talking about here. My portrait personal work, I'm definitely inspired mostly by probably poetry and music, and also in not a way nature, but it's not heavily influenced. I think for weddings and a more kind of business approach, I draw more inspiration from the environment that surrounds me that day or that moment than I do anything else. I very rarely look in a magazine or read a book and then I'm like, oh, I can apply that to weddings. I don't. I think weddings are its own beast, and the biggest inspiration for me with a wedding is that every wedding is unique, and it's almost like a clean slate every single time, or a blank canvas. And what I look at a wedding as is, when I go into that wedding, is I have this empty space in front of me, and I'm a painter, and I can do whatever I want for the next 4, 6, 8, 10 hours, and to make that canvas look awesome. And each wedding is a different ballgame, and I may walk into a wedding and it's, like I said earlier, it's a cold, rainy day in February in Philadelphia, and it will look cold and rainy in like a Philadelphia wedding. And then I could be hired to photograph a wedding in the summer in Hawaii, and it's going to look like that. So I don't draw a lot of inspiration from outside sources for wedding work. For wedding work, I am definitely inspired by the people in front of me and the location I'm put in. And very rarely do I get to go and see. I don't really scope out ahead of time or scout too much ahead of time, because like I said, I'm this maybe crazy person that loves the challenge, and
you have a lot of trust in the unknown.
I do. I have a lot of trust in my ability. I'm very confident in what I do. I'm very critical of what I do. So, I mean, we all know photographers and artists are critical of themselves. I'm highly critical of myself. But at the same time, I'm extremely confident. So I walk into anything, I'm like, okay, I got this. Here's what we're going to do. And that, I think, inspires me the most. But for personal work and that stuff, it's music, heavily music and writing and poetry.
Who do you like listening to? What's the music you like to listen to?
Lately, it's this singer-songwriter, RyX, which is RY and then a space and then X. He's been it's super melancholy and sad, and I love dismal and sad. And
I'm with you. I
my
like the minor chords.
yeah, yes, the minor chords are definitely better than the major chords. I'm a huge fan of Tallest Man on Earth. Um, he's probably my go-to guy. The band Daughter is a great band that I love right now. Again, moody kind of folky guitar work, singer-songwriter stuff. I don't do much upbeat stuff, not lately at least. And I grew up in hardcore and punk and metal, so I'm always playing that kind of music too.
Oh, I understand. I get, because we're getting close to our hour here, so I always ask, how do you deal with, in today's world, disappointments, setbacks, competition, social media, pressure, blogging, never enough time, and millions of images, editing, the edit meaning more choosing a picture, particularly when you have a mass of them to choose. How do you deal with all this stuff? And has there ever been, like you hit a wall or a disappointment or a setback or mean-spiritedness, or how do you kind of take in all that stuff and keep going?
Man, that is
loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, I could spend the next hour talking about all of that. I think that the drive to create something unique in me is massive. And I think to answer that question so broadly is that drive basically beats out all of that other stuff. And I hate to make that so broad, and I could go into all the nuances in that and really dig deep, but in all honesty, I firmly believe that I am here to do something unique and create something unique, and I will strive to do that. And I am highly critical of myself, and I put myself down. I have extremely low self-esteem, and I've hit plenty of walls. I've hit plenty of situations where I'm like, I don't know what to do right now. I go through every winter. I go through that kind of 2 to 4 week rough patch where you just think you suck and everything else sucks, and I do it all the time. But my drive to create something that nobody else has done and nobody else has seen outweighs all that bad stuff, and it is, quite frankly, one of the only things, there are very few I'm sure, but one of the only things that keeps me moving along. And that, I think, is why I explore all sorts of different mediums within photography itself, and with film and digital, medium format, Polaroids, 35. I explore all these things because I'm constantly seeking and searching for something new and exciting and different. And a lot of people will say, and you hear it too in music, and I always compare photography to music because I think they're almost identical. I'm sure you've heard, how much more music can we get? I mean, people have done everything, and yet we're constantly find something new, and it just so happens that I don't know how it happens. It just does. And I think that's the same with photography. I think a lot of people are so quick to say, well, everything's been done. And even I say to myself, I'm like, everything's been done. There's nothing else you can do. You can't make that any different. And then I'm like, but what if I can? And I think that's where I started going with this whole Veiled series and Persona series, personal work, is that I'm trying to do something that I don't see very often. And I'm not saying that nobody else has done it. I'm sure somebody else has done something similar, and I see it. But my goal ultimately is to do something that nobody else has done. And I use that mentality for my business side of work, the weddings and portraits, and also my personal side. And that is legitimately the one major thing that makes me overcome any obstacle out there.
I think that's a beautiful way to end, because I love the whole comparison to music. I've never thought about it quite that literally.
Yeah, I mean,
But
it's the same.
that's a great analogy of how much music is there, and yet it's constantly being reinvented and referenced and pushed forward and backward. But there's always new sounds, new voices. You're right.
Right, and there's always going to be the popular musician that everybody's like, well, they're just catering to the masses. And there's always going to be the popular photographer like that. And there's always going to be I tell people a lot, and I had held a retreat with my buddy a few months ago, and we talked about this, and it's like I like to equate my goal as a photographer as being something like Sigur Rós in music, where they're not massively mainstream, and they're not hugely popular, but man, do they have a loyal following.
Yeah.
And that's because the people expect something better and higher and more unique each time. And you may not like it every time. And there are albums that I love more than other albums. But at the same time, I know that I'm going to get something from them that not many people have done or have ever done. And I respect that. And my goal is not to jump to stardom and fame and popularity with photography. It's to create, and it's to create something that nobody's ever created. And I may never get there, and that may never happen, but I'm going to try my best to do it.
You're on your way.
And
there's a lot of images I've never seen before that you've created, so
thank you.
Yeah. We should really close that you are having a workshop, correct?
Well, I'll have one I don't like to call it a workshop because that's
it's a retreat. Let's call it a retreat, a gathering, a retreat.
I was thinking about holding one this spring, but I'm going to pass on it, and it's going to be this November. There's a lot of stuff that came up where I want to make sure that I put the time and effort into it. I can. So there will, the next one will be this November. I don't know where yet, and it will be with my buddy Narav again. So there will be a retreat. And
okay, so you're not doing the one up in near in the Hudson Valley?
No, I'm not going to do that one this time around, just because we might move very soon, and it's really causing a lot of
chaos,
not stress, but chaos, right? And I don't want
Go figure. We're all thrown into chaos these days.
I don't want to not put my heart and time into it because I want to make it good. So there will be one in November, and I definitely want to do one in the Hudson Valley. I don't have an answer as to when yet. So I kind of postponed it, so to speak.
I'm thankful for that because I'm interested in that.
There was
one
a ton of interest,
and I love that area.
Yeah, and I got a lot of emails saying, will you do that again later this year, maybe the summer? So I think I just have to figure out what is going to happen. But there will be one in November and possibly one again in the Hudson Valley or Catskill region. But I really liked the first one we did. It wasn't workshop oriented. We basically stripped away everything that had to do with workshop material. There's no processing. There's no model shooting. There's none of that. It's just us talking about what we just did for an hour and for a day or two. And
that's cool.
It's really good. It was very enlightening, and it was very impactful, and it impacted me far greater than I had originally thought it would. And we got a lot of good feedback from the people that participated. So I'm looking forward to doing more of those, because I think that more of that stuff is needed rather than the typical show and tell kind of mentality. I like the idea of inspiring and talking.
I agree. There is a lot of helpful knowledge-based, technique, and then immersion in that technique. But there's I will always go back to, I'm so thankful I went to a workshop with Mary Ellen Mark.
That would have been awesome.
And it was intense. I mean, when you had mentioned that you were insecure, I mean, I walked in there, I felt like I was in art school all over again. Oh my God, I suck. What am I doing here? I'm old. Look at these kids. And then, I brought my portfolio, which I was semi-proud of until you see other people's portfolios.
Right.
And I was feeling punier and punier and like, oh my God, why did I come?
Yeah.
And, then you go through I did my thing and then I went to her lecture. I mean, I left. I went to a meeting. I cried. I just wanted to leave. And I went to her lecture that night. And in her lecture, I really looked at the fact that she photographed everything. There wasn't anything that she didn't photograph. High, low, up, down, cool, sterile. She did it all. And so the next day, when she took us to this fair up in New York State, this old, like very small town, rural town, county fair, and turned us loose. And I'm going to tell you, the piece that I took away the most is tell them your purpose, who you are, what you're doing, and why it matters. It changed everything for me because I had no problem. I went around and I was tasked with doing portraits and I did. And it was it was interesting that a lot of people who were very comfortable turned out being not so comfortable. Some people who had great portfolios really didn't do this task that well. And I found it very freeing. And there was one picture, I actually posted it today on Facebook, that this girl that right when we got to the county fair and we were parking, I caught these two little girls walking in that had cowboy hats and cowboy boots on. And I knew I like a certain kind of kid, and the one was that certain kind of kid. You felt it. And she was one of the very first pictures I saw. She came off a ride right in front of a backdrop that had America on it. And I asked her grandparents, I told them who I was, what I was doing, and why. I took one of the two of them and one of just her. Is it perfect? No. Would I have pulled back? Would I have done a lot of things different now? Yes. But it was such an important picture for me in so many ways that still we did not talk about a lot of technique. We talked about work that informed the technique, if that makes sense. So sorry, I just went off on a whole little thing.
No,
I don't even know if we'll include that.
It's
but
fine. I think that in this day and age, it kind of goes back to what you just said. It's I like being thrown into a situation and having to fend for myself, and I am not good at setting things up. And I think with this day and age, there's so much style and not a lot of substance, and it's people tend to set things up and have things delivered for them in front of them, and they kind of do the last bit of the shooting, and there's a lot of editorial and there's a lot of this and a lot of stage things, and I agree with you. I think being thrown into a situation it benefits every photographer regardless of what style you are, and I think that's kind of where my personal belief is that workshops started to go down a road where I don't like the road that they went down, and they got too much about fame and popularity and being next to so and so, and less about what you just said. And they can say all they want. You find your inner voice. There's a big difference between showing and teaching. And you can show all you want, and they're just going to go out. Most people will just kind of go out and copy, and not a lot of people are good at teaching. And teaching itself and talking and inspiring is a completely different ball game. And that's what I think is needed more. And I think we're going to see a shift soon, to be honest with you. I think people are starting to get fed up with it. And I think we're going to start seeing a shift into more of that kind of, hey, let's go hang out as friends. We can all learn from each other, and let's be inspired, and let's get out of our comfort zone. I really do think that that's going to start. We're going to start seeing that, and I'm thankful for that too.
Well, Michael, this was just spectacular. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This has been another episode of My Life Creative with Richard Zombeck and Pamela Joy. You can find us online at mylifecreative.com, where you'll find more information about us, our guests, and while you're there, please consider supporting the show to help us produce more content like this.
Oh yeah, can you feel it? Just over the credits, just riffing now. Words and chords. Not the poetry and the real thing, but not bad for an ad-lib. Not good, but... And it's not long enough, so just do a little bit more. And that's nearly done. That's the final credit there. That's the end.